Hand sewing can be both practical and artistic. It's important when practicing to work toward consistency. There comes a time, however, when we've mastered a skill and artistic expression comes into play. Embroidered designs offer tons of creative possibilities. Knowing when to break the rules or make up your own comes with a good amount of experience. It's the beginning of finding your own voice as an artist. It's time to graduate from felt to cotton or linen fabric. During this lesson, we'll be completing a floral embroidery piece. You've learned several embroidery stitches, but when we talk about embroidery, this is what most people think of. It's done by stitching on a piece of fabric being held tightly in a hoop. Cotton and linen are both great fabric choices for embroidery. For my piece, I'll be using linen, which has a little bit more of an open weave, but cotton fabric works just as well. I recommend sticking to one of these because they're easy to work with. Let's go ahead and take a look at cotton and linen fabric side by side again. They're both natural fibers, and so they look very similar, but you can see that linen fabric has a little bit more of an open weave and cotton is a little bit tighter, but either one works great. Before we get started, we have one final stitch to learn. The fishbone stitch is a fun one and makes great looking leaves. So grab a scrap of fabric and some floss and let's practice a few. First thing we're going to do is just draw a leaf shape on a scrap piece of fabric. And then draw a line down the middle because we're going to be using that middle line. To begin our fishbone stitch, we're going to come up at the point of the leaf and insert our needle about halfway down the line on one side of the leaf. And on this same, so we're going to look at the leaf as two separate halves. So I'm poking my needle in on the right side, and then I'm going to poke it back up on the line of the leaf at the very top. Now I'll be bringing it back down on the other side of the line. Now I'll be working on the left half, and I'm pushing it down, halfway down into that center line, and then back up again at the top of the leaf. And to do the fishbone stitch, all I'm doing is going back and forth, right side of the line, and moving my needle down just a tad, just like we're doing a satin stitch. We're filling in a space. Now I'll be going over to the left side of the line and filling in on the left side. So I'm just going to continue down the leaf, filling it in as I go, back and forth from left to right, always inserting my needle on one side of the line and then the other side. And that gives us a nice little center line down the middle of the leaf. And then for your last stitch, you just want to poke it right down in the middle of the tip of the leaf, and then you're ready to tie off. Practice a few leaves until you feel like you've got the hang of it. When you're ready, you can move on to the project. This is the floral design that we'll be embroidering onto our fabric. This is a little bit different than anything we've done so far because we don't have actual pattern pieces. We just have a pattern that is printed on one page. And so what we'll do is take our 10 by 10 piece of cotton or linen fabric, pin it to our paper, and we're going to trace the design directly onto our fabric. The first thing we need to do is to get this design onto your fabric. Although there are a couple of different ways to transfer the design, let's use your fabric pen to trace the design directly onto the fabric since that's what you already have. You'll need your pattern, your fabric pen, and a few pins. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this design and get it onto our fabric by placing our 10 by 10 piece of fabric directly over the design. And then let's take a few pins and pin our fabric to the paper so that when we trace it, it's not going to wiggle around or move on us. To transfer the design, you'll need a light source. If you have a light box, that would probably be easiest, but a glass-topped table with a light underneath would also work well. If you don't have either of these, a window works great in a pinch. I'm going to be using a light box to transfer my design. So I'll take my pinned fabric on the paper, and I think it's easiest to work from left to right, like you're reading. And this does not have to be exactly right because this is all just an artistic endeavor, and if you'd like to add your own little flair, that's completely fine. One thing I want to point out is these little flowers here on the left are daisies, and so they'll be worked in a long stitch. I like to make just a circle to work within when I'm working my long stitch. So even though the actual flower is a bunch of long stitches coming out from the center, those circles are going to give me the border that I need when I'm stitching. I'm just going to continue to work my design with my pen all the way across until it's completely finished on this piece of fabric. Now that we're done tracing our design, we're ready to stitch. We'll be using 3 different greens for the stems, and we'll do them all with the stem stitch. The leaves will be done in the Fishbone Stitch, Satin Stitch, and Daisy Stitch. Then we'll continue with the long stitch, the Satin Stitch, French knots, and Daisy Stitch for the flowers. So thread your chenille needle with 3 strands of green, and let's get started. To use an embroidery hoop, the first thing you're going to do is loosen the screw on the top so that the middle circle comes out. You're going to take the smaller circle, the one that doesn't have the screw on it, and place it underneath your transferred design. Place the fabric right in the center, or as best as you can get. We want to have that right in the middle. And then we're going to take the larger circle hoop and press it over the bottom hoop, and that gives us a nice tight working surface. Then we'll take the screw and give it a couple twists so that it's nice and snug and we are ready to stitch. Let's begin on the left, and we're going to work these 3 stems in the stem stitch. When I get to the end of each one, I am going to tie off because I don't want to strand my floss that far across the back of my work. Another thing to think about is that this fabric is light colored, so any floss that strands behind is probably going to show through. So for most of our stitching, we are going to tie off when we get to the end. So we're going to start the stem stitch. We want to make sure we hold the floss to the same side while we're working the entire row. And we're going to come down about 1/4 of an inch, insert the needle, and then back up maybe 1/16 of an inch up from where we began. So that's the first, only our first stitch is going to be like that. And I'm holding my thread off to the left. I'm going down about 1/4 of an inch, and now we're going to be sharing holes for the rest of the way down. I'm finishing up these 3 little stems, and then as soon as we're done, we're going to move on to the leaves, which we will work in the fishbone stitch. For our fishboned leaf, we're going to come up at the tip and do just as we practiced. We're coming about halfway down the middle, going to one side of the middle vein and coming up right on the other side of where our first stitch came out. Then we'll be crossing over this line onto the left side and back up through the top, right on the line on our leaf. Then we'll just be alternating back and forth, filling in this leaf with the fishbone stitch. Let's go ahead and finish these little flowers before moving on to the others so we can see what they'll look like when they're all finished. I'm going to do my daisies in white. So to work up these little daisies, I'm going to start at the outer edge where I drew my line and then come into this little circle in the middle, and I'm just going to go in on that line and then pop right back out on this outer line. And I'm going to continue to go all around the circle. So my stitches on the inside circle are going to be closer together than the ones on the outside. And you are going to be able to see the pen line on the outside of the stitches, but we need to remember that that will disappear as soon as we touch a warm iron to it. So go ahead and work your way around all of these little daisies. This is the long stitch. This is the same stitch that we used when we were working the underneath part of the mushroom on our pin cushion. Okay, I've got the 3 little daisies done, and now I'm going to come in with some yellow to do some French knot centers. We're off to a great start. We're going to skip the next stem and do the droopy daisy next because the flower with the French knots should overlap the daisy. So get your needle ready with 3 strands of a different green. Let's work this stem next, and we're going to do it in the stem stitch. Then we'll come back up here to these 2 leaves and do those in satin stitch. Now that we've got our stem stitched, we're going to come in here and do these 2 leaves with the satin stitch. Instead of tying off and starting again over here, I'm going to turn my work over and then thread my needle underneath these stitches on the back side so that I can just pop out right here, ready to start this second leaf. Okay, it's time to do the daisy. We're going to do the center and the petals the same way we did the leaves. Because these petals are so close together, I don't need to tie off in between each one. So I'm just going to start my next petal here on the bottom instead of at the top, and I'll work them. So I worked this one down, I'll work this one up, down, up, and then finish down over here. It's looking so good. Let's do the little French knot flower next. And for this stem, we're going to work right over the stem we just completed, overlapping them. I'm going to work up this little stem next, and we'll just stem stitch down the stem. And when I get to the bottom, I'm going to thread my floss up through the back of the stem, and we'll come back in here and we'll do 3 little daisy stitches for the leaves. And you'll notice that I chose my 3rd color of green to do this stem. Here's the part where I'm going to overlap these 2 stems, and it's okay to just go right over this stitching that we've already done, because we want these stems to look like they're crisscrossing each other. Now that I've finished this stem, I'm going to flip my work over and let's see, I need to take note of where my first little daisy stitch is. It's right about here. So I'm going to thread my floss through some of these stitches that I just made, working my way up the stem. So we'll come right up at the base of the leaf, go back down into that same hole and pop back up at the tip of the leaf, looping my floss around, and then pulling it through. I'm ready to work up my little French knot flower. So you can see the little dots here that I drew as I was transferring my pattern to my fabric. I'll start at the top and work my way down. You can see that I chose purple for my flower. So you can choose whatever color you like. And these dots are really close together, so it's okay to strand my floss behind my work. The big long stem is next. We'll do the stem stitch first and then tie off, go back to the top and do daisy stitches all the way down. So thread your needle with green again. Okay, we're gonna overlap another stem. This stem has fishbone stitch leaves again, so we'll start at the top with the stem, work our way down, then we'll do the leaves, and then finally we'll go back up and do the flower last. You'll need a different green on your needle this time. Okay, now I'm going to come back up here and stitch these 6 little pieces of the plant that are sticking out on the top. And once I'm done with those, we'll do 3 single stitches for some more stems and then little French knots on top of those. And because these are so short, what I'm going to do is come back here and anchor my stitch by going under this stitch so that I can just continue going on this little stem without having to tie and cut my floss. And I'm going to turn my work again and just strand my floss across the back and go top to bottom on this one. All right, now that I have these done, the last step with my same color green is to make 3 single stitches in a V formation on the end of each of these little stems. So I'm going to come, I can't use the same hole to come up through this time, so I'm just going to go up and around each time, starting on the outside, working my way to that same shared hole. Finally, I'm going to come back in here on top of each of these little 3-pronged stems and put a French knot on top of each one, and I'm going to use yellow. All right. This stem is a little bit different because we're going to blend the stems into each other. You'll catch on as we go. We're also going to fill in the daisy stitch petals by doing a long stitch first and then coming back around to do the daisy stitch on top. You'll need green on your needle again. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this center longer stem in the stem stitch. Then I'm going to tie off and I'll come back here and we'll do this little stem and this one and we will blend them into this main stem as we go. Okay, as I get down here, I'm just going to blend in that final stitch by poking it right into the existing stem, and they just kind of blend right in there together. Then I'm going to come up right here and I'm going to work this stem coming this direction, but I'm going to make sure that I'm holding my floss off to the same side so that they all match. And finally, I'm going to come down this little stem with just some little V's poking out for the leaves. And I didn't even draw them on because I'm just going to freehand this. So you can use the reference template if you like, or you can just stitch them wherever you think it looks like they should go. I did not draw my flowers on top of these stems, and I did it on purpose because I just want to draw 5 little lines that kind of look like a star, because I'm going to come in here and do a stitch on top of them before I do my daisy stitch, and then that will give me something to follow. So if you want to draw your daisy stitches in, you can do that, or you can do it this way as well. I'm going to come in the center and I'm just going to make 5 long stitches all coming out from the center, and then I'm going to go back around again and do a daisy stitch on top. And what this does is it just fills in my daisy stitch a little bit to give it a little bit more color. Now I'll come back in with the daisy stitch. All right, and for the final thing on these little flowers, I'm just going to come in and put a yellow French knot in the center of each one. We're almost done. Now let's work up the final 2 stems, so choose a new color and thread your needle. For the second to last stem, I'm just going to come in with yellow and work my way down in the stem stitch and then back up with little V's all the way up. For our final stem, we'll do the stem stitch all the way down and then come back and do 5 little daisy stitches to finish it off. Then I need to come right back up here and do my daisy stitches, but instead of tying off, I'm just going to weave my way back up through these stitches on the back. Beautiful! Your embroidered piece is complete. There are so many things you can do with this finished piece, but we're going to frame it as a piece of hoop art. To do this, you'll need your finished piece, your hoop, your needle, and a long piece of embroidery floss. So while I still have it in the hoop and it's centered, this is exactly where I want it to be when it's all done, I'm going to draw a line around the hoop so that I have a good idea where to cut. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to take it out of the hoop. Set that aside, and then I'm going to take my fabric scissors and we're just going to trim off the excess. And then the final step I'm going to do before I put it back in the hoop to finish it is we're going to give it a good press so that all of these marks that I have left on here will disappear. And I'm also going to just give it a good press so that it's nice and flat when I put it in my hoop. And now I'm going to take a piece of embroidery floss that is a little bit longer than the distance that goes around my whole design, because I'm going to do a loose running stitch all around the outside, about not quite a ½ inch from the edge. So I'm going to pull it until I've got a little bit of a tail hanging off there. And these can be nice big stitches because we are using these to gather up our fabric on the back. These don't need to be pretty because they're not even going to show. Okay, now I've gone all the way around the edge of my piece and I've got my 2 tails hanging right here. And we're going to go ahead and put it right back in the hoop. So we'll take the small piece and center our work right in the middle. And I want the screw on top because I might tie a bow or something around the top of it when I hang it on my wall. So it's going to hang right here from the top. I've got it nice and tight, and we're going to flip it around, and we're just going to pull these ends, and it's going to cinch that right up, and then you can go ahead and tie a knot. And there is your finished two-part. Now that you have the skills and knowledge to create your own design, go outside and find some flowers, plants, leaves, or trees that you want to stitch. Draw your design on a piece of paper, trace it onto a piece of fabric, and stitch away. You can use more strands of floss for a bolder look or fewer strands for a finer look. Choose the colors that you like or try different stitch combinations. The point is to just try stitching a design that you came up with yourself. See what you can do.